Okay, so welcome to this introductory talk for mainly offer holders. There may be some applicants in there as well, um, but for those of you who are coming in September to do the MLitt Dress and Textile Histories, um, I'm Dr. Sally Tuckett, and I am one of the co-conveners of the program. And as I mentioned a minute ago, this is just going to give you a brief insight into what we are expecting to happen in the program over the next year. Um, as the last 2 years have taught us, that could change. It could change at very short notice, but we are expecting things to be more or less quote unquote normal in September. There are going to be caveats to all of that, but we will deal with those as they arise. So, first of all, just a little bit about um, the team that you will meet. So, this is the Dress and Textile Histories team. On the left, we've got Professor Leslie Miller. Until recently, she was also Senior Curator of Fashion and Textiles at the V&A. She's now solely Glasgow University's, I was going to say property, but that sounds wrong. But she's the professor of the program, and so she brings curatorial expertise, museological expertise, as well as being the leading scholar on 18th century silk manufacture. And her expertise, I don't know why it keeps flipping forward, sorry about that. Her expertise also extends up to Balenciaga and 20th century fashion and design. Person in the middle is me, and I've been convening this program for longer, nearly 10 years now. My interests are in 18th century Scottish dress and textiles leading into the 19th. So be prepared for lots of chat about that on the program. I do try and slip it in whenever I possibly can. I'm currently looking and researching a book on linen in Scotland and looking at the transatlantic connections that we have with that. And then on the right, we have Dr. Sabina Bieber, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. So she's the co-convener of the program now. I'm basically in charge of the first semester, so I'll be your main point of contact for the first half of the year. And then Sabina takes over in the second half. And Sabina is a lecturer in history of art, architecture, and design. She's got, again, wide-ranging research interests, which, and I think the three of us exemplify how dress and textile histories can be approached from many different angles. But her interests include the domestic interior, gender and identity, and the history and collecting of Art Nouveau. And she's just published a book on the Jugendstil women, which has just come out. And she's currently working on fur and the fur trade. So we've got a wide range of interests, and that I think is reflected in what we offer in the program and what you come into contact with. But it's not just us. Students on the program are part of history of art, and we pride ourselves on this being a relatively, that plays it down a lot, students with a rich and diverse background, basically. We are not the only postgraduate program in history of art. There's also an MLitt in art history. There is an MSc in collecting and provenance studies. And the Dress and Textile Histories program is part of a subsection within history of art called the Kelvin Centre for Conservation and Cultural Heritage Studies. And that incorporates two other postgraduate programs, namely textile conservation and technical art history. Apologies for the typo there. I should say technical, not tech in Cal. That's something completely different. So those three programs were part of we're generally based in Kelvin Hall, which is one of the buildings in Glasgow, and part of that structure also incorporates the study centre for the Hunterian Museum and Art Gallery. So we have curators very close to hand who look at all sorts of fabulous things, not least caring for the Mackintosh House, which you can see in the background of this picture here. So there's a lot going on, there's a lot happening, and Dress and Textile Histories is just one small part of that. So to give you a sense of the program itself, the nuts and bolts, because it can often be quite a nebulous thing to try and get your head around. This might help, might make it worse, who can say? We'll see if there are questions at the end. But to get the Masters in Literature, the MLitt, you need to do 180 credits. And that consists of 6 20-credit courses over 2 semesters for full-time students. So you typically do 3 courses each semester. The three of these courses are core, which means you have to take them in order to be eligible to get the degree. And then there are three optional courses. Once you've completed all of those, there are progression stages throughout. So you've got to pass semester one to go on to semester two, and you've got to pass semester two to go on to the dissertation stage. But the idea of these courses is that they give you both the skills and the methodology and potentially contextual background into an aspect that you can then go on and research in your dissertation. So we know that students don't necessarily come with either a dress history background or an art history background or even a history background. And it's the course is designed to give you insight into all the different ways that you can study dress and textile history. And I'll talk a bit more about those at the end. Not at the end, even in the next one. So these core courses, the three core courses, two of them will be taken in semester one. The first is research methods and skills, and this is something that all of our postgraduate students in history of art have to take. Again, we're not expecting people to come necessarily with a history of art background or a dress and textile histories background. So this gives all these students a chance to see how history of art can be studied on a wider basis. It's a very diverse field. I am not an art historian myself, so when I first came to this department about 10 years ago, it was a learning curve for me to realize how broad and diverse history of art actually is. I naively thought it was just looking at paintings, but it's so much more than that. And we have experts that look at contemporary art history. We have experts in the field of impressionism. We have technical art historians, curatorial art historians, a whole gambit. And the idea is that that course is team taught. So you hear from a different member of staff each week, giving you an insight into a particular topic that they're studying and a particular methodology that they're using. So that's the first core course. The second one, which is purely for dress and textile history students, is Framing Dress and Textile Histories. This is the one that I run, and this is a course which, like I say, gives you an insight into how dress and textiles can be studied and how they have been studied. So we basically start with object-based approaches, because that's the groundwork of so much of our work. So looking at surviving garments, surviving objects. In the background here, you can see Sasha, who's one of our current students, doing an object analysis of quilt pieces dating from the 19th century. So we start with objects. We consider the use of art history to approach dress history. We look at economic perspectives, social history perspectives, and fashion theory, giving you these building blocks on which you can decide what angle, what approach you want to take yourself as a member of this new cohort and how you want to approach your own topic. So that course starts, it moves broadly chronologically. So each week we will look at a different aspect of history and apply a particular methodology to that aspect of history, because different eras lend themselves to different methodologies. So it gives you an insight into how that might be approached. And that will hopefully set you on the path to knowing what you want to do and how you want to do it. And then in semester two, the core course that will be next year run by Sabina is called Applying Dress and Textile Histories. This is a generally guest lecturer taught session. Most weeks are led by a different person. And the idea is to give you a sense of, having seen how dress history can be studied in Framing Dress and Textile Histories, applying gives you the chance to talk to people that are actually applying it in their life, in their work, in their careers. So this course changes every year. We have different people coming in every year, and we try to get a balance of textile practitioners, historians, the curatorial perspective, as much as we possibly can. So to give you a sense of that one, this year, for example, we had researchers from University of Glasgow who are working on a knitting project and looking at how knitting is part of the fundamental social and economic makeup of Scotland. We've had curators from Glasgow museums come and talk about how to create and order huge sets of data in cataloguing and databases of collections. And this year we've also had, I'll try and get his title right, oh, forgive me for this one. He's a dance practitioner, but he uses textile history as a way to think about dance and practice. So that was like more of a hands-on. I don't think there was actual dancing involved, but there was definitely more group work involved in that one. And we've even had costume designers in the past, so including the costume designer of The Crown, and she zoomed in from the location where she was currently filming on and talked to the students about how she incorporates realism into her work. So it can really vary, it changes every year. But again, the idea is to give you a sense of how people are currently using dress and textile histories in their own work. So you can see how it's used in practice as well. So those are the core courses. The optional courses for 2022 to 3, these are still being finalised. I can tell you that for sure, Victorian Visions and Fabrics of a Nation will be offered. Those are definitely being offered. Understanding Textile and Material Cultures we're 90% sure are going to be there, but we're not quite sure definitely yet. Work placement is always subject to approval and subject to change. That depends very much on who we have, on what the institutions can offer at the time. They are going to be limited, so not everybody on the programme will get a work placement. We just can't physically accommodate that, and the institutions themselves can't accommodate that. There's still a lot of restrictions in place from COVID. A lot of museums are still not back full in place in person. So that's going to be a limited one, but there will be some work placements on offer. But to give you a brief overview of the ones that we definitely know are happening. So Victorian Visions, that will be led by Sabina Weber in semester 2. It's kind of self-explanatory in terms of the title, Dress and Textiles from 1837 to 1901. These courses are more a deeper dive into a particular chronological era. So it's less methodological focus compared to, say, framing and applying. These give you a chance to engage more with some of the primary materials, more of the up and coming research that's happening in this field and in this area. So this year, for example, I know Sabina's been talking to students about nationalism and dress in the 19th century, the development of the arts and crafts movement, all sorts of different aspects. Industrialization is a big one. The rise of technology and the sewing machine. We're very luckily placed, advantageously placed in Glasgow, as the 19th century was huge for Glasgow's development in terms of industry and technology. So just down the road, we have the former site of the Singer sewing machine factory, which was the main sewing machine manufacturer for Europe. You can't see anything there now. Train station is still called Singer, but that's as far as it goes. But there's a little museum there which has information about it. We've got Paisley Museum just down the road, which was the home of Paisley shawl manufacturing, huge fashion trend in the 19th century, and lots of colonial connotations mixed up in it. So there's lots on offer, not least the artistic movement associated with Macintosh and all sorts of things like that. So that's Victorian Visions, which will be in semester 2. In semester 1, the course I'll be leading as an optional course is Fabrics of a Nation, Scottish Dress and Textile Histories. This is going to be the first time this course is running. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Things like pandemics got in the way, but this is now fully going ahead. And again, it kind of builds on Scotland's diverse and rich textile history. We have a lot that we can build on for here. For a small nation, there's a lot happening in terms of practical and rather dull textiles like linen, which I've been exploring, which is not dull at all when you start to scrape beneath the surface, to the more obvious ones like tartan and Highland dress. But we'll be looking at issues like what fashion means in Scotland in certain historical periods, the influence of Scottish designers on fashion trends in the 20th century, so use of tweed and things like that. It's quite wide. Chronologically, it'll be broader than, say, Victorian Visions. We're going to look probably at the 18th and 19th century in general, in particular. But the idea is that it will hopefully also get you embedded in the institutions in Scotland that you can use for research, and that will help develop research skills that you should hopefully be able to take anywhere else as well. The 2 courses, Understanding Textiles and Material Cultures, these are courses that are offered by the staff who run the Textile Conservation Programme. So I'm hoping these courses are going ahead. If there's not these two, there will be some sort of variation of them. Another option, I think, is sometimes preventative conservation, but as you can probably imagine, the last couple of years have been quite tricky in terms of staff and research leave and people not being able to take research leave. So it's still a little bit up in the air as what's going on. But these two courses are ones which, if you take them, you would sit alongside textile conservation students. So it's a really good chance to get a different perspective on what you're doing. If it's something that is always enjoyable to watch, it's watching the dress history students talk to the textile conservation students, and the different ways of approaching an object and the conversations and the information that comes out of that is really interesting, and we love seeing that. So it's a good chance for you to engage with that perspective. Material cultures is more wide ranging, and that is more of the material culture methodology, but obviously with a focus on textiles. And understanding textiles looks more at the practical aspects of some of the making and the creation that goes into these things. There's a little bit of a practical element involved. I believe you're supposed to produce a little sample of your chosen textile that you want to explore further. Weave structures, fibers, materials, that kind of information. So those are the core ones which are offered and will hopefully be offered in this coming year. As we get closer, I will be able to offer more information about this and possibly preempting any questions. We don't know yet what days these courses are going to be on, I'm afraid. We haven't had confirmation from room bookings about timetabling, so we're not sure when they're going to be. And again, COVID has meant everything kind of got thrown up in the air and then dropped back down again. So this year there's been pressure on space because we had to socially distance, but I think the hope is that we won't be socially distancing in September, so hopefully spaces will be back to normal, but it does mean that everything's just a little bit pushed behind. If none of those appeal to you at all, and hopefully that's not the case, because in which that would mean you're on the wrong program, then we are happy to talk to people who've seen a course that's offered elsewhere in the college or in the school. That is subject to it not clashing with core courses, because you have to do the core courses, and it's also subject to that course convener agreeing to taking outside people onto that course. So for example, dress and textile histories, we tend not to take outside people because we have space issues. And so some courses have similar problems that they need to navigate. But we are happy to talk about that once September comes around and once the list of courses is released. So in August, you'll get registration information, and that's when that all comes about. Once you've done all of that, like I say, there are progression stages. So you've got to pass semester 1 to go on to semester 2, and then once you've passed semester 2, you can then go on to your dissertation. And this is your time to really draw on all the information and practices that we've given you over the year. So it's an independent research project. You would get assigned a dissertation supervisor, and they would meet with you periodically and go through the process and what you're doing, offer you feedback on any written work and any drafts that you've got. The key is that it needs to be like a critical analysis. So again, we've hopefully been giving you the tools to deal with this as you go along, but it would use primary and secondary material. We like people to engage with primary material, whether that is artwork, objects, manuscripts, whatever it is. We want people to use it. The idea being that you are offering your own unique contribution to the field of dress and textile history. And it's hopefully not a daunting sounding 15,000 words. So that's, but again, the talk components help you build up to that. So if you've never written that much before, don't panic, because the essays help you build towards that goal. So that is a very brief overview. There's probably a few questions, which I'm happy to answer.